I think that Ionescu guy, I don't get it.
No, I don't get
I
it
should
either.
have what I should have done was drop both into ChatGPT and said, "What the is going on here? Can you explain this?"
Yes, sort this out, please,
Yeah,
ChatGPT.
yeah, please,
Yeah.
because I can't be bothered. I haven't got time for this. Hello and welcome. My name is Richard Simon. I am Cloud Therapist. This is the September episode of Cloud State of Play. Back with us from his extended break, a little bit too long for some people, maybe, might say.
Well, not long enough for others.
Not long enough for others, but we did miss him. Is the illuminating Paul Bevan. Paul is the Director of Infrastructure Research at Bloor Research. Paul, welcome back.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed my little break. I enjoyed some of the people who came in and scared the living daylights out of me because they were so good. I thought I might not get back on, but no, it was good to have a little break during the summer, and weather was good. Yeah, so but good to be back.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, unfortunately, this is not about this episode is not about Paul's holidays, so we're going to have to get down to business. Our topics for this month are number one, the seventh wave: how AI will change the technology industry. This is by the CEO, apparently, of Forrester Research. Second topic is strategic planning covers three horizons. This one's by Gartner. So lots to say about that later, as we've been already discussing offline. And then the third one is architecting backwards: how open source is hijacking enterprise architecture. So before we do that, here's a quick channel message for you. Did you know that 80% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet to this channel? Come on, guys, we can do better, surely. So please hit subscribe and the notification bell. It costs nothing, but it really helps me to keep making more videos for you. All right, back to the therapy session. So the first of our topics is the seventh wave, Forrester Research CTOs, or CEOs, I should say, blog. He's kind of really distinguished a number of waves that have happened, right? And there was a guy who actually put out a message on this poll. I think he's probably a LinkedIn influencer, Lewis Walker, who put out a post, and I think that alerted me to the blog from the CEO of Forrester Research. And the blog is really talking about kind of advent, certain events that have happened in the IT industry, and this kind of big shifts or paradigm shifts, or whatever you want to call them, sort of big events that have happened. And he's sort of maybe we'll kind of go through what they were, but he's kind of talking about the how these events or revolutions, I think he calls them revolutions actually, in the post, and he cites 6 of them. How these kind of affected the IT industry, but also affected the players, the vendors in that space, and their kind of reaction to to these so-called revolutions as well. So the 6 revolutions are the mini computer revolution, the PC revolution, internet, the social revolution, mobile, and then more recently cloud. And then obviously he's going to go on to talking about how the next one is affecting vendors, which is the sort of the AI, Gen AI sort of thing. So yeah, what was kind of your initial take on this blog, Paul?
I think it's the best way of describing it was, yes, we can all see this. The seventh wave I felt was a little sort of, highfalutin. I mean, it is another tech turn going on here. Is it a complete break with things in the past? Actually, probably is. AI is getting seen to be a sort of a clean break that's going to cause all sorts of disruptions in the
Mm,
industry. But no, my general, as an old timer, I think, things like he should have gone back a bit further and looked at, the advent of virtual machines in mainframes and
mm,
that really changed the way in which mainframes worked. Mini computers, did they have the big impact that he was seeing? Yeah, we lost a few companies down the way, like Digital Equipment, like Data General,
mm,
etc., like Wang Computers that disappeared. But mini computers didn't feel like a major, break in the system. Whereas the
mm.
PCs coming along, I think, democratizing computing the way it did, I think that really was a big break. I mean, everybody will argue as to which was was it a break? But mini computing to me seemed to be just a way of bringing the smaller enterprises into the world, and then starting to kick off the distributed computing a little bit. But was it epoch changing? No, I don't think so. Um,
Yeah, and I would have thought maybe open source would have been kind of, if you're kind of going to go for that. I mean, obviously the mixture is hardware and software and sort of platforms and things like that. And it seems to just essentially come out of his CV, basically.
yeah, I mean, the big change, and if you want to make it, what really was that the underlying change was, well, Unix first and then Linux particularly, I
Mm,
think changed the ballpark. Because the
yeah,
first mini computers were proprietary. They were they were reasonably clunky.
yeah,
I mean, some of the mini computers we had at Burroughs were effectively small mainframes.
yeah,
It wasn't really a big change. What changed the ballpark for everybody was Unix.
yes.
And everybody tried to subvert Unix, and until Linus Torvalds got in there and did Linux,
Mm.
really sort of unpicked it all. That opened up a very, very different world, which and the PCs sort of fed off the back of that as well. So
Yes, yes. So yeah, so the article's from July of this year, and we'll obviously provide a link in the description of the video for that. I just kind of wanted to just to pick up on one of the lines, which so kind of maybe the choice of the revolution, so to speak. Like I said, open source kind of encompasses Linux and other things. Would have been maybe my choice, but not kind of not necessarily agreeing with all of those there, and whether they were really that significant, as you said, Paul. Kind of both from the hardware side, so many computers and PCs, and then kind of sort of enablers like the internet, social media, mobile, and then maybe kind of a little bit more on the software side with cloud and so on. And obviously now with AI as the seventh wave. So he's seventh wave is the sort of the AI Gen AI. But the quote I wanted to kind of get was and he said in the 80s and 90s, when faced with a new wave, the legacy tech companies would freeze in the headlines or double down on their suddenly obsolete business models. This allowed new players to gain traction and redefine industries. So the mainframe players largely crumbled in the face of mini computers, and the mini computer industry was decimated by the PC. And then he says executives back then were not learning mindset thinkers. They were defaulted to the stonewalling. They defaulted to stonewalling and then responding, but too late. So, I mean, for me, isn't that always been the case with every single generation that we've had? I mean, even with, and you and I have kind of gone back and forth on this recently, even with the advent of cloud, and then every, data center vendor, your Dells and HPEs of the world, and, everybody, renamed all their, marketing stuff to cloud to say, oh, this is cloud and we're doing cloud. And now it's obviously AI and Gen AI. So the question for me, to you is, isn't this always the case anyway? Do they not kind of get lagged behind and then somebody else comes and picks up,
yeah,
the baton?
I think 9 times out of 10, yes, they do. I think the one I would highlight as, if you like, the one that bucks that trend is Microsoft. And that was cultural. It was a
Mm,
case of, particularly when Bill Gates said jump, everybody said, how high do you want me to jump?
Yeah.
Or if he said, now I want you to turn 180 degrees, everybody in the organization turned 180 degrees.
Yeah.
And most organizations didn't, and the ones I worked for did not have that level of, A, corporate vision at the top, and B, yeah, everybody believing in where they were going. So, we always used to laugh in Burroughs and Unisys that, you get
Yeah.
10 of us in a room trying to do product marketing, we'd come up with 11 different ideas,
Yeah.
and then we try and run with all 11,
Yeah.
Um,
It just doesn't strike me as a revelation. There's nothing
no,
riveting about
no.
kind of you say, well, these were kind of okay. So the six revolutions, like I said, we can argue whether that's the case. Maybe swap a few in and out, but then the statement that I read, which I think was kind of the crux of it for me, really, about sort of existing vendors, kind of being deer in headlights, and then trying to stave off the changes that are happening while execs at enterprises kind of trying to really sort of respond, but being late to the game. But that's, like I said, that has always been the case. I don't really see that as anything new. That observation, that's kind of a
I,
something that happens almost every other year or something.
I think the basic premise is right, is that, existing organizations find it very difficult to accept the new coming in from sort of left field, if you
Yeah.
and but they have different ways of handling it. One of the things that we're starting to see at the moment, of course, is those organizations who are reacting to changes are going down the let's acquire the new technology or the new ideas, and and that's not often very successful, I have to say. I mean, you see quite often, large existing organizations trying to buy up some of the new startups, etc., and just killing them.
Yeah.
Either
Yeah.
on purpose or just because they don't understand the cultural differences. But there are others where, I mean, you talked about, people like VMware and Dell, following the cloud and calling everything a cloud. So that's a marketing response that says, actually, why can't we manage the messaging and it'll all be all right? And again, it's just another, but it's all part of the same syndrome, which is you get a new competitor with a new idea coming in from left field, and the immediate reaction is defensive.
Yeah, yeah, and he cites things like, or companies like Kodak, for example, being sort of
Yeah,
stuck in the past. We could also mention Blockbuster being
yeah.
stuck in the past as well. So
Well, you get
you know,
whole industry. I mean, there's a book. Oh, I can't remember the name of the guy. I'll find the name of the guy who wrote it. It's called Marketing Myopia, and
mm,
it was developed in the 1960s. And he was talking at that stage about companies being blind to the new developments happening around them.
yeah,
And you call it marketing myopia, and you can apply it to industries. So he applied it to the American railroads. It's
yeah,
just they thought they were in the railroad business, and
yeah,
actually, what we should have said was we're in the transportation business.
yes,
And they might then have fended off the impact, at least the worst impact of cars and aeroplanes and God knows what. But yeah, you're right. Kodak is a classic. Blockbuster's another one.
yeah. So I mean, and I think in that sentence that I read out, he's hitting both at sort of the tech companies, the vendors, if you like, as well as enterprises with the executives sentence at the end. But I mean, again, I don't think any of this is really
No, it's
you
not.
know revelatory in any way at all. Enterprises are always lagging behind. They always take longer to adopt something, and sometimes they're a bit too late to adopt it. I don't really see that as a as anything new, and especially kind of for me where I've worked in the vendor space in the past, both the hardware and software. And I've seen that, for up close, where customers just take a long time to adopt stuff. No matter what we're bringing out and trying to sell to them, they just say, "Well, I'm happy with sweating the assets that I have right now."
Well, I don't want to turn this into a marketing exercise, but that's one of the tricks. I say tricks is probably the wrong word. One of the tactics of marketing is to understand who the innovators are out amongst your target audience.
Yeah,
Who are the people who will go early? We've maybe talked about this in previous ones, and I won't name company names, or some of them don't exist any longer. But we would see that when we came out with new services or new products, there were certain companies we would target with us because they're the ones who were the innovators, and they would take the ideas. Others would always say, "No, I want to see half a dozen other companies do it before I do it,"
Yes.
and always be the laggards. And there's plenty of quite learned research out there about the way in which, but it comes down to the fundamental that most at an enterprise level, you get this horrible inertia, which is you won't do anything until the pain of doing nothing is greater than the pain of the change.
Yes. So just to go back to the guy who was actually commenting, Lewis Walker is commenting on the blog post from the Forrester Research CEO, and the CEO is called George Colony, by the way, just in case anybody's wondering. So Lewis Walker's he made some notes on it. So he talked about the tech waves, the 6 tech waves prior to AI, and then it says Gen AI, and so he's kind of summarizing George Colony's article here. So he's saying Gen AI enables low-cost adaptive software that threatens incumbent low-code, no-code platforms. Yes, we know that, especially with things like vibe coding. Colony outlines AI's broader impact on hardware and tech services. So all the giants are being hit. Google, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple are listed. Incumbents are deploying defensive strategies by buying challengers and blocking disruption with regulation and pricing and so on. And then he says other tactics include pretending to be part of the new wave through rebrands and bundling of AI into existing dominant products. So things like, for example, Copilot being added into MS Office as an example. But I mean, you could cynically look at it, that specific example, you could cynically look at it like that. But you could also say, well, this is actually part of this 7th wave, the Gen AI wave, because the first stage of using Gen AI is augmentation. It is augmenting existing platforms, augmenting existing software, augmenting existing ways of doing things. It's not a replacement in the first stage. The first stage is an augmentation. So from that perspective, I think it's valid. I don't think there's a problem with that. That is how you would do it. I'd expect that to happen. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I'm still not convinced that this is kind of going anywhere. Like I said, that's kind of revelatory in any way.
No, the one thing that I found interesting, fascinating when I was sort of reading the George Colony article was he talked about saying that people should wait for AI finance, AI CRM, and AI ERP offerings from AI native vendors, as opposed to doing what we've just literally been talking about. How do you augment the existing? And so my concern about that was that if you wait for those to come along, the big change you've got to make, because you're that much further behind, I think you need to be taking and integrating some of these things.
Absolutely.
And there's no guarantee that the new boys coming along with the new tools will be any better than the old boys, as it were. So I think
Agreed.
I was quite surprised when he said that.
Yeah, and it's kind of equivalent to the, are you just doing a cloud migration or a digital transformation? And a digital transformation is a much bigger beast to deal with than just kind of migrating slowly into the cloud, whichever cloud that might be, whether it's a private cloud, a hybrid cloud, and public cloud or whatever. It's not relevant. But the point of, are you doing a digital transformation, which is a bigger thing, and cloud migration is one of the pillars of that, or are you just doing that pillar of cloud migration itself? So this is kind of equivalent, I think, to that as well. As you said, the augmentation, bringing in things slowly, introducing them, or as he's saying in the article, to actually wait for that startup which is going to be kind of replace everybody in CRM and ERP, and it's fully AI native and so on. Well, yeah, I mean, but we could be waiting 10 years for that, while Salesforce and SAP and so on, which are current investments for us, for a lot of enterprises, are introducing those features, just like Microsoft has introduced Copilot into Office. So, and in some cases, you actually don't have a choice. It's kind of inevitable that it's going to be, introduced and, augment existing solutions.
I think the danger for enterprises generally is if they've not got far down the genuine digital transformation journey, they will find the jump to the transformation being demanded by AI very, very difficult and costly.
It's a huge chasm. It'll be a huge chasm at that point.
Yeah. So again, people can't go, oh, you can't suddenly say, oh, I'm going to skip the digital transformation piece because AI is going to get me past that. Yeah. I think people will get a nasty shock if they try that.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, I don't agree with the kind of the seven advents, the seven sort of revolutions, if you six revolutions rather, and then AI. Sure, yeah, that's the sort of current revolution. But I don't necessarily agree with the original six. I also don't agree with the point about kind of waiting for these sort of AI native messiahs to come along and sort of offer us AI native solutions. I think because you've invested in things like Oracle and SQL Server and Office and SAP and Salesforce and whatever, you have to really kind of look at making use of AI and Gen AI within those tools in that sort of augmented fashion. I think you have to do that because you have to. That is the way to move with the times. That is actually, goes against that point of where he's saying, oh, executives always kind of stonewall everything and bury their heads in the sand until it's too late. Well, but actually doing a little bit of iterative and small changes as you go along, rather than, as we said, rather than that kind of massive digital transformation, is the way to avoid that. That is the way to avoid that. So why has he got a beef against people looking at augmenting things like Copilot in MS Office?
He also made the point, he was saying that CEOs don't really understand what AI is. They want it, but
that's beside the point. That's a red herring. That's beside the point. I don't see. I mean, that's a different argument. I think here it's the adoption. Do you wait until the AI native messiahs turn up, or do you kind of progress with the solutions that the incumbent suppliers, which you've invested in, by the way, you've invested in their license, subscription, whatever, hardware, software, whatever it is that you've purchased from them, you have a vested interest, and that investment is not something you can just say, oh, you know what, I just take it all back, Salesforce. I don't want that because I want to go over here with these AI native guys. It's not something that you can just turn away from so easily.
I know, but if he was talking about the fact that it made it easier, that lack of knowledge made it easier for the resistors to resist. And again, I thought that was a little bit unfair, but you are hearing quite a lot of, hey, AI, we've all got to be doing AI. And somebody said the other day, do you use AI or are you doing AI? I mean, almost, if I've got Copilot running and I just use it every now and again, or I use ChatGPT for a few things, yes, you're using AI.
Yeah.
Are you doing AI? Are you, and my point, really here, looking at the Colony article, was about use the time to re-engineer your business models.
Yeah.
If you don't, none of this will work.
Yes, but like I said, while AI is in that sort of augmentation phase.
Yeah.
So I would say adopt the augmentation stuff, embrace that, because that gets you going, gets the your teams and your staff, your employees to embrace that.
Yeah.
And use AI, as you put it, for now, and then later on you can do AI as well.
Yeah, I mean, we will probably come back to this because there's so many. Oh, we're seeing quite a lot of surveys coming out now about the success or otherwise of digital transformation and whether
Mm,
it had any impact. And also, increasingly, you're starting to see, has there been any impact from the use of AI? Yeah,
mm,
and therefore, there's a danger of creating, you build it up, never mind the bubbles that you potentially get, but you build up this dynamic that says actually it's not been, it doesn't really do what it's supposed to do. It's underperformed, and that could put it back, a long, quite a few years. If business leaders get to the point where they go, well, I may have said I wanted it, but it's clearly not delivering anything, so we'll stop it. I mean,
yeah.
that could be very destructive for what's happening.
Yes. Yeah. And like I said, I think the only point I really do agree with is that the vendors get caught in the get caught in the headlights, and then they do that sort of marketing, renaming exercise of renaming everything to cloud, or renaming everything into AI as they are doing at the moment.
Yeah.
So that is the case. I really don't know what the I don't know what the answer is to to that. I wish that some of these vendors would change the way that they do things, because it's just so transparent. They're very transparent when it comes to what they're trying to do. To as I've discussed with you in the past, where they're trying to remain relevant. Like the data center vendors and so on. So I don't know what the answer is. Maybe they need to acquire some of these companies, which is again one of the tactics that's been mentioned. How do you remain relevant? I think that's got listed. Acquiring the disruptor is kind of part of that sort of tactic for the
But
incumbent vendors.
but they've got. I think there was comments around that this is as much about culture as it is about new technology.
Mm,
And the danger for the disruptor is that you get bought by a technology company where the culture is so
different.
opposite, different to what that is, that it just
Yeah.
doesn't fly.
Yeah.
And quite often they sink without trace.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's very hard to make that transition, and then to actually integrate the two cultures as well.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
that's happened with GSI's global system integrators as well, where they bought a relatively nimble, new, fresh,
yeah.
boutique consultancy, because they can't afford to. Their fees are too expensive, and these guys are kind of eating their lunch. So they've decided to buy them and kind of said, yeah, okay, we'll just have you guys as a subsidiary, the cool and hip sort of subsidiary with jeans and t-shirts over there.
Well, hold that thought for one of our later in, questions in this particular segment
Okay, all right,
in
all
September,
right.
so, because I think there's some relevance to some of the things we're going to talk about shortly.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so like I said, the suggestion is that the legacy vendors would buy the so-called interlopers, so the likes of Instagram and WhatsApp got bought out, block the new wave, with regulation and pricing and so on, pretend that they're part of the new era. So as we said, they're kind of trying to join in with a lot of marketing sort of stuff. And then, as we said, linking existing dominant products with the new offerings, kind of keep the challengers out of the sort of the main arena. So again, he cites Microsoft Copilot as part of that.
He did make one other comment that's probably worth bringing up, if only to park it for a future discussion, which was, talking about the infrastructures. He said, no doubt, infrastructure's had a boost. But he also said, but still the risk that the huge investments will not generate returns for everybody. So this is sort of bringing up the idea of potential for a bubble,
Yeah,
and what will happen if that happens. I think that's a completely different topic and subject to have,
it
which
is. It
probably needs
is.
to be. But it was he was trying to cover all the bases, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. But like I said, I just found it wasn't very balanced. I didn't see, like I said, some of it was kind of quite pedestrian. Other stuff I didn't really agree with. But that, yeah, the point of kind of what the legacy vendors sort of being caught out, and then enterprises just lagging behind. I don't agree with the recommendation, as you said, of wait until kind of the AI native crowd turns up.
No, I agree.
Either.
I agree. My goodness me, we ended on where we both agree on something.
For once. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. So the second topic was Gartner strategic planning. I laugh at this because you're going to find out why I'm laughing in a minute, why I'm smiling in a minute. So Gartner put out a kind of a strategic approach, to how you should be kind of doing your planning, your strategy, your mission. When it comes to really anything, it's kind of whether it's IT related or not. Obviously, we'll kind of have that IT slant to it. But it was I mean, the article for me was quite comprehensive. It looked quite solid. There was some good charts in that. Again, we'll drop all the links for that in the description. And it seemed to kind of really, be quite comprehensive in what it was trying to really tackle. So I was kind of relatively okay with that one. So it was kind of 100%, but it did seem to make a lot of sense. And they were kind of talking about the strategic strategy or strategic kind of planning covering 3 horizons, I think they said. So kind of having a sort of a short-term operational plans, having mid-term strategic plans, and then long-term strategy. I think that was the approach that they had. And I have to say, this kind of really mirrors a lot of what I would normally kind of advise on, which is to have a sort of a 1 year or 12 month sort of action plan, because there's always stuff in front of you that you cannot avoid that needs to happen. Have a sort of a 3-year roadmap. So, what do you want to be kind of trying to achieve in the next 3 years, whether you achieve it or not, and whether the roadmap changes is not relevant. And then kind of have a 5+ year sort of vision of where you want to be, in 5 years and beyond, essentially. So that kind of really, the way that Gartner put it, seemed to fit in quite well with that, and I agreed with that aspect of it.
Yeah, there wasn't much that you could disagree with in what they wrote. It was pretty standard stuff. It's interesting that we keep coming back to the same sort of 3 areas of vision, strategy, and execution, and give slightly different words to it. So again, it was done. I mean, I was intrigued by the way you ran through that, because from my perspective, you went back to front. You said, well, you've got to have all the operational 12-month stuff, and then you want something a 3 to 5 year view, and then the 5 year out, almost as if that's the way round. And to me, that's counterintuitive. You should have the 5 year vision of what you want to do. And what's the 3 years, what do we need to do between now and 3 years out to make sure that we can get there, and what are the things we need to do inside the 12 months, and so it's almost, because otherwise what you see happening in many organizations is that 12-month, oh, what have we got in front of us, completely blinds them to what the rest of the things they need to. They just forget about the 3 and the 5 year. It was put in a sort of huge document somewhere. In the old days, it used to be a binder that was yay thick of here's the vision and strategy, and then it would go back on the shelf. So you call hence the term shelfware. Because the 12-month stuff would be driving you, and the challenge for every organization is how to link the long-term vision. If the long-term vision is where you want to be, what are the things you've got to start doing now that are going to take that 3 to 5 year time scale to start bringing through? What are the,
Yeah.
what are the way you've got to reorganize yourself? Oh, and by the way, we've got to keep the lights on. So what do we need to do in the next 12 months? And I would always add at the end of that, that doesn't screw up the 5 year vision. And that's one of the things that gets forgotten is that you do the sort of things that you're doing today. Say, oh, I've got to do this, got this revenue target to meet and that output to, to get out
Mm.
there. And you suddenly find that you've actually screwed your vision because you haven't changed what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah.
So again, I think all the elements were there, but the danger is that you forget to go from left to right, or or work backwards. Actually, you say, well, where do I want to be in 5 years' time, and work backwards to, right? What do I need to do today? And
Yeah.
brackets, I need to keep the lights on. I need to be able to pay the bills this year.
Yeah.
But that has always got to be in with the sort of lens that says, if I do that, will I screw up my 5 year vision?
Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, I don't disagree with that. I'm merely listing them in that way.
Yeah.
I'm merely saying because I always, and even Gartner's actually guilty of this sometimes. The charts that they put up, they go right to left and not left to right, which is really, I find extremely annoying. And they've done that a couple of times in the past. But all I'm saying is that I tend to start with kind of what is happening right now. What do we need to do right now? And I don't mean like we just do that and then stop. What I'm saying is we figure out what that is, and then we look at that medium term and then the long term. But you're doing all of them. You're creating all of them, right? And you're doing it all at the same time. You are putting all of that out all at the same time. The way that you're actually then sort of acting on them is, like I said, the 12-month sort of actions first, and then that allows you to then look, beyond that to the 3 years and to the 5 year plus vision. Yeah.
Yeah,
But you're when you're sitting down, you're not just saying, okay, so that's the 12 months. Are we done with the 12 months? Is that it? Yes. Okay. Let's go. I'm not saying that. I'm saying they all get created. They all get created at the same time. But clearly, the 12 months action plan is the first thing that will come up in terms of activity that you have to do. You practically have to do that first, while looking at the roadmap for the 3 years, while still, as you said, focusing and course correcting for that 5+ year vision.
yeah. I still think there's an inherent danger in taking it that way round, as quite as boldly and baldly as you've said,
Well,
because I think
you can create it any way you like. I mean, you can say, okay, what is our 5 year plus vision, and start there in terms of the creation. So when you're creating these things, you can do it any way you like. You can go from the 5 year and say our vision in 5 years is this. Okay, so then go backwards and then kind of do it. Well, I call it backwards. But
yeah,
then go kind of, okay, what is the roadmap? And then, okay, what do we have to do in the next 12 months?
but
So
then
I don't mind whichever way you do it, as long as you do all three.
I agree. You've got to do all three, and sometimes you have to work right to left. I mean, you said you got annoyed when you're working left to right, but sometimes
But you can still do it all left to right in terms of putting it down on paper. So the vision can be the first thing on the left, and then the roadmap is the kind of the middle one, as we said, and then the action plan is the thing. So putting it down, just writing it down, it can be any way you like.
But I would say to you, if you put a 5 year vision out there, and then you just immediately say, right, here's the 5 year vision. Right, now what do we do today? That's actually quite difficult to do. If you start and say, what's the vision in 5 years' time? You say, all right, where do I want to be operationally, culturally,
Yeah,
strategically in 4 years and 6 months?
right.
What are the things that, if I'm going to get to 5 years and go, tick, I've done the lot. 4 years and 6 months, where should I be? 4 years, where should I be? 3 years, where should I be? What should I be? 1 year, so in 1 year, I've got to get from where I am today to where I need to be in 1 year to stay on that path. That's me trying to say, keep
Yeah.
keep your mind on the vision. And I find it, maybe it's the way my brain works. I like working right to left because then whereas, you start on the left-hand side and you're going, okay, I've got 5 years. And human nature being what it is, oh, I don't need to worry about that for 4 years and 6 months. It's sort of, we have, not everybody, I mean, but an awful lot of us, and I'm guilty of this, I need a deadline. And therefore, if somebody said to me, well, we've got to hit that 5-year vision in,
Yeah,
oh, well,
in
that's
5 years.
5 years away. Oh, yeah, that's not a problem.
No, no, yeah, like I said, I do agree with that, and maybe, yeah, maybe, yeah, maybe kind of, I would just because we write left to right, I would want everything to go left to right physically when you're kind of writing it down, visually when you're writing it down. So, but I do agree that you need all those three steps. You do need the vision, you do need the midterm thing, the 3 years, the middle bit, and then you need the next 12 months, right? And just because practically you are going to be engaged in the next 12 months of whatever that requires you to do, that would be kind of the starting point from left to right. But that doesn't mean that we're not looking at the 3-year roadmap, and it doesn't mean that we're not looking at the 5-year vision and course correcting so that we do hit that 5-year vision, or we try and be as close to it as we can. So I think this is kind of a visual thing, a representational way of looking at it. And then the other one is the actual strategy itself. And for the strategy, like I said, you need all three and more, maybe. Maybe there's like an even 8-year kind of thing as well. But certainly, as how Gartner describes it, I agree with it. It's kind of going from the bottom up in their chart, which we'll show you, by the way, on the screen.
I think Generative. The only thing I would add to that, and this is a sort of financial accounting type thing, is make sure you set your targets and your incentives, the right way. Because obviously, quite often if you incentivize people to do things in the short term, they might well be, not the things you want to do in the longer term. Or you might need to incentivize people not so heavily on, let's say, call it profit today, but development for the future. You've got to get that balance right. So there's an element of that. But yeah, I don't think we violently disagree, but
No.
I think my brain works better working backwards from, what have I got to do? Because I'm a lazy little so-and-so when I'm given them, well, you've got 5 years to do it.
I think the only thing I see kind of advantageous is that as you're, saying, oh yes, I got to do these things the next 12 months. There's no way to avoid those. And then, but in 3 years, I'd like the roadmap to be, to look or to have achieved these things on a roadmap. So I've kind of got, like, as you said, milestones and targets, to hit from 0 to 3 years. And then ideally in 5 years, I want to be, here, or whatever that destination is. So in setting that up, I see that I could probably do the 3-year roadmap and the 5-year vision better if I start with what am I having to deal with, what am I going to have to deal with the next 12 months? And then that would potentially influence the 3-year roadmap, and then will potentially influence the vision going forward. But at the same, I think it's reciprocal. It kind of goes back the other way as well, because the vision is, so let's say our strategy, or this particular strategy, is to migrate to cloud. Okay, so in the next 12 months, I want to have completed my survey, my assessment of which workloads I can migrate to cloud, and maybe even started doing some as well. In 3 years, I'd expect to have maybe achieved 25% of my workloads migrated to cloud. Ideally, in 5 years, my 5-year vision is to have, migrated 60% of my workloads into cloud. And that would be kind of the action plan for the next 12 months. Do the assessment, migrate as much as you can. 3 years' time, I'd have achieved 25%. 5 years' time, I'd have achieved 60%. Because as we hopefully get better, and iterative migrating stuff, it should get easier. So we should be able to achieve that 60%.
We're missing something, and I think it's probably for a different time. Is that in doing that, you're assuming that the vision always stays the same, because technology changes, cultural changes, all sorts of things will change what's possible, and actually, people coming up with a vision are not working left to right. They're seeing right out to the future and going, I think this could happen. How do we make it happen? Is that right to left movement? And therefore, I think if you follow the left to right, just in the way you described it, you might end up with all your applications in the cloud, having done your sort of migration, and you've still got a business that's dated, 5-year-old business rather than the modern business, So one of the challenges, and it was part of the, there was some other comments on LinkedIn around this particular article. I know you wanted to sort of bring one or two of those in that sort of challenged the idea, but the issue is as much you have to link the vision to where does the business need to be, not where does the technology need to be. Where, if the vision for the business, based on what's happening from a technology and cultural and social point of view, is this, what have I got to do? Not I've got to migrate everything to the cloud. It is, what have I got to do for the business? And that's the bit that we're in danger of missing in this conversation we're having now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think I disagree with that. I think I think we're probably maybe looking at it from a different sort of approach, because yes, again, in terms of the overall strategy, it depends on what is this strategy for, and there's different types of strategies for different types of things that you do. You're not going to have just one single strategy for your organization. So if it's a business strategy, you're right, I agree, and that it will be based on what the business wants to achieve in 5 years. Do you want to be using, I don't know, more AI? Do you want to be reducing the workforce by 20%? Whatever the vision is for for that sort of 5 years. But there's also obviously other types of strategies, like technology strategies as well, right? So this is kind of within IT, within the IT team or department looking at themselves and saying, well, we've got to, like, I think we need to, and we'll serve the business in a better way if we migrate some of these workloads into the cloud, because it's more efficient, automated, and blah blah blah, and we can fail fast and all that kind of stuff that that cloud brings to us. So that would be a kind of an IT strategy. It can still employ this 12 months, 3-year, 5-year thing, but it'll just be purely for improvements within IT to serve the business better. Now, the business, version of that strategy, I don't know, that can be whatever, and that could also be in a similar fashion, the 12 months, 3 years, 5 years approach as well. But I'm not necessarily looking at that. I'm looking at this more from a technical perspective. What is the sort of things that we need to do to keep serving the business and actually be an innovator and a supporter of the business, not a cost center.
I think again, as usual, we're not a million miles apart. I just think that
kind of in the same orbit.
There are times when that sort of perspective on your technical know-how or your sort of area of expertise. I mean, you talk about workforce planning. Clearly, what we're going through at the moment is going to need an incredibly different workforce strategy. And you're going to have to get your head around the nature of work and how do you pay people and all those sort of issues. And that's all driven by, what's my business going to look like in 5 years? And am I going to have, full-time paid employees, or are we all going to be working in some glorified gig economy? I mean, that's putting it, those are the sort of two extremes. But again, at all points, it is, where are we headed and what do we need to put in place to get there. So I agree that you will want to be more flexible, more adaptable within the IT space, and therefore going down a digital transformation route is absolutely the right thing to do. And going into the cloud, yeah, right. Just the danger is at any one point in time we forget that overarching driver. That's my thing about the 5-year vision.
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, I don't think you said earlier about kind of that being quite restrictive or being kind of unchanging. I don't think that's the case in terms of the vision. I mean, that can always, I think that can always change as well as you're going along, because as you said, from a technology point of view, things will come at you sideways, and you won't see them coming. So you have to respond to that. Just like Gen AI has really hit everybody, sideways. So just on the article, the Gartner sort of report. So this kind of goes through strategic planning basics, then goes to strategy versus planning, strategic planning mistakes that could be made, and then strategic planning processes as well. And there's actually quite a lot of stuff in there which I thought was very useful. So things like the 3 types and 3 levels of strategic planning. So you have a corporate level, business unit level, which you kind of touched on in terms of the business, and then functional, which could be kind of departmental, so finance and sales and whatever. And then 3 types of actual strategic plans. So having a kind of a strategic plan, an operational plan, and a contingency plan. So I think these are all quite valid. What was your kind of just take on everything else, Paul, that was in the Gartner article?
Just like you, I mean, it didn't say anything that we shouldn't already know. What that was the interesting thing. It's put out as this sort of these 3 areas that you should look at. As long as we always tend to try and make it there's something new, but actually it's part of a long history of that sort of strategic planning, visioning and strategic planning that goes on in business. And I thought it was very comprehensive. I actually thought it was, it was good. It worked well.
Yeah.
I didn't see any big gaps in it. There was nothing in there that said, oh my God, no, they've missed this or they've missed that. I just thought, no, it's been but it was sort of, I suppose maybe some of the following discussions we have will come on. My only question was, why are they doing this now? And it's almost like, well, maybe it is we need that sort of new words for it, because when you get to be an old fuddy-duddy and you've seen it, the same thing happen 4 times, called 4 different ways, but actually it's just the same thing that was done 4 iterations ago.
Yeah.
Why do we need to keep going through this? So I think it was just another of those, that there was nothing spectacularly new in there. It was really just trying to get us to focus on, a process that we need to follow. And maybe that's the argument in there, is that whether we like it or not, there are processes that help us make large organizations work. And if we ignore the process, it'll be chaos. And bring on the next 2 subjects, and we'll get into a little bit more detail on that.
Yes, I mean, I guess just on that point, I guess they're just kind of refreshing things, or they have kind of a new way sort of to approach it, or maybe something new that they would like to add. And I think it's always good because we're clearly discussing it and going through it. Now, we kind of largely broadly agreed with everything, but there was somebody on the Gartner post that was put out on LinkedIn who did not agree, vehemently disagreed with it. 100%, 200%. There was a guy called, and apologies if I butcher the name, Mihai Ionescu. So Mihai said he put out a comment on the Gartner post on LinkedIn, and I think he pointed to his own post, which was responding to, I think, the Gartner post itself. So in his response post, he says, unfortunately, they have employed for that purpose some strategy illiterate, this is a quote, strategy illiterate and near incompetent guys who are publishing on the strategic planning webpage of Gartner's Insight section. So clearly disagreed. And he said there's confusing part of it. So strategic planning, so he's talking about strategic planning. So strategy covers a multi-annual horizon. Actually, as McKinsey has coined, it covers the 3 horizons of growth. But strategy is only an intellectual construct. To implement it into practice, we employ several annual execution cycles. I mean, I don't really see that's. I think this is kind of a lost in the translation, or the semantic use of words or something. Yeah, I don't really see a huge difference in what he was, at least in that sentence, from what he was saying and what kind of Gartner's trying to get at. And then he adds a clarification of the confusion. So the confusion he's putting out, he's saying strategy is not a planned thing, nor is it related to strategic planning, nor does it include or is included in any strategic plan. And the strategic plan certainly doesn't cover 3 horizons. Okay, so I don't know, because
I just felt he was getting mixed up between what we would call vision and strategy.
Yeah, and he just quoted McKinsey, and he's saying McKinsey says strategic planning covers 3 horizons of growth, and now he's saying it doesn't cover 3 horizons of growth. So I don't know, because in that previous paragraph where it says strategic planning, and we'll show you all of this, by the way. We should be seeing it on the screen somewhere. It says he says actually McKinsey has coined. So 3 horizons of growth, but then he's saying strategy is not a planned thing, nor is it related to strategic planning, nor does it include any strategic plan. And then he's saying the strategic plan or strategic planning certainly doesn't cover 3 horizons. That's plain stupid. So I'm confused.
The one that got me was we don't cascade any strategy goals to the strategic plans. So hold on a minute. You don't. There are no sort of strategic goals in a vision, and that vision to strategy, that might be.
Yeah.
My God, if the strategic plans don't bear any relation to the
we're in real big trouble then.
You are in big trouble, boys.
Yeah. Now, at this point, just to be fair to Mihai Ionescu, I actually connected with him on LinkedIn. So I reached out and I asked him some questions in regards to his response to the Gartner post. And I kind of wanted him to sort of explain his position a little bit more. So I kind of explained that I was covering the Gartner post on YouTube. So that was all fully above board. And I informed him that I kind of maintained really an agnostic position on the whole thing. And I also was clear that I'm not really an expert in the field. So I just kind of wanted to kind of clarify the situation, and obviously his very strong disagreement with Gartner as well. Then I proceeded to ask him a number of questions to get really some clarification around what he was saying, as I said. So the first question was, I said, what would be a better approach to cover this area? So with the Vimosa sort of framework work, and that's a kind of a strategic planning framework. It stands for vision, mission, objectives, strategies, action, and action plans. The response I got from Ms. Ionescu was that the Vimosa framework, and I'm quoting this, is the creation of some superficial ignorance. They simply did not read the required books and preferred to invent stuff based on their simplistic understanding of what strategy is and how it works. I got bombarded at this point with a whole number of web links to basically go and read a little bit more in regards to why the Vimosa framework is not viable. So that was the answer to question one. Question two, I asked, could it be that Gartner are looking at this from purely an execution of the strategy sort of angle or perspective? And the response to that, and again I quote, departmental or function level strategy is nonsense, probably originating from the same misunderstanding of strategy, end quote. So that was the response. And again, at this point, I got bombarded with a whole bunch of web links again for me to go and read some more. So moving on to question three. I said I simplify normally the strategy approach into what I explained actually in the video earlier on. So if you missed that, go back to the beginning of this topic. I basically said the kind of the 1 year action plan, the 3-year roadmap, and the sort of the 5-year vision. And I asked him what his sort of opinion was on this kind of pragmatic take. And the response was, and I quote again, this pragmatic approach is an insult to the 10,000 plus implementations of the Kaplan-Norton BSC framework, close quote. The Kaplan-Norton Balanced Scorecard is essentially a strategic management framework that measures the company's performance beyond financial metrics by incorporating non-financial perspectives. And again, at this point, I got, yes, you guessed it, some more links to go and check out and read more stuff on. So at this point, I decided to call it quits. I thanked Mihai Ionescu for his generous contribution and closed the conversation there. So there you go. You can't say I didn't try. Yeah, so I think he's barking up the wrong tree there. I think it might be just like I said, lost in the translation or just terminology being used here. I think broadly speaking, we do have to do these things. So whether it's kind of his approach or what he thinks is the right approach, I don't know. I mean, I just feel that the Gartner one is very pragmatic. It's it's the stuff you need to deal with today. It's have a roadmap for 3 years of what you want to do, and then your strategy is there for the long term. That long-term vision, 5-year plus vision of where do you want to be? What would when you look back in 5 years or 8 years, what do you want to kind of see that you've achieved? What was kind of the long-term vision?
I suppose one thing you might want to ask Gartner is, who was the target audience for this? Because you sort of feel that the people who do strategy and strategic planning and all the things will know that implicitly. Is this part of getting people who've become used to a much more chaotic, ad hoc type of approach to life that we'll probably come across?
Which we will come to.
And we just need to re-educate, because we talk about a layer of management that acts like a sponge on things, and nothing ever comes out the far end until they get overloaded and the sponge is so full of water it drops everything.
Yeah.
You go around that, and is this really just a way of saying to people who've rather forgotten about what's going on in the sort of fast-moving, chaotic world we're in, that you actually still need to do this, guys? Because the people you employ to do strategy and strategic planning damn well ought to know about those, and if they don't, again, God help you.
Yeah, and the charts which they put up, the strategic plan for leaders. So it's actually a strategic plan for leaders, it says. That might kind of answer your question. But that does have a vision statement. There's a vision statement in there, and there's a current state, there's a planned state, and there's your future state. And I think that's quite sensible. What my view on this would be is to let's not knock it. Let's try it out. And if this is not working, then okay, let's go and get McKinsey in with the 3 horizons and whatever else. But I would say it looks sensible. It's pragmatic. That chart, like I said, really fits in with kind of the way I would look at it, and that's why it actually appealed to me when I first saw it as well. So, Mihai, I don't know. Maybe it's a lost in translation, or we're just getting terminology wrong here. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Let's move on to our third topic. So our third topic is architecting backwards how open source is hijacking enterprise architecture. Now, we talked about this in the previous topic. We kind of hinted at it, and yeah, I mean, I do see that we are, as you said, we are running away with and getting excited by all this new technology, whether it's open source and cloud native, whether it's AI and Gen AI and so on, and it's kind of not allowing us to say, well, hang on, where does this kind of fit in as a word again strategically with with what we want to achieve? Is this, are we just playing with that because this is just the latest tech and we kind of want to play with it? Is it kind of the latest toy, or does this kind of, is this advantageous for our business, right? And is open source and cloud native design a kind of a shift left of how we do enterprise architecture going forward?
I'd hate to use the term shift left because I don't think you can shift it left.
Google is talking about shift down, which is a completely.
I mean, but because I think you've got sort of epoch defining change going on in the world generally, which says, minimum viable product, fail forward, fail fast, work it out and make it better. And we've seen that creep into, I mean, I hate, put it like this, the worst job in the world will be the first astronaut to go on an Elon Musk journey to the moon. The chance of survival could be quite small because he works on the principle, get it up there fast, let's have a launch. Oh dear, the booster blew up halfway through. We'll fix it in the next release,
Radiation belt? What radiation belt?
Yeah. So I think, there are, and I think it's captured the whole of our imagination is that if we are not completely agile and use the Bloor term, if we're not mutable, i.e., perpetual change, then we die. If you stop moving, you die. And it's got to the point where, I think it's gone too far, to be honest. And would you build a house, a modern house that you want without any architecture's input from the architect?
Yeah.
No, of course well, unless you're a brilliant builder who can see it in his mind's eye, most people are going to need an architect's design. And it just, for me, it feels like we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater because enterprise architecture had a bad name for taking, way too long, being inflexible, all the things that open source and microservices and the whole sort of cloud environment has said, let's change, we need to be nimble, we need to be agile, we need to be fly. Goes against the idea of having a defined enterprise architecture.
Yes.
And I just think it's gone too far, and therefore, what's the way in which we can prototype to a design rather than just throw it together and see if it works, which is, and I'm sure, the sort of space program that Musk has got running isn't quite as bad, but it does feel like, oh dear, that one didn't work. Let's try the next one, and you're thinking the first time they say, we're going to put astronauts on it now, you're going, I hope you've got rid of all the problems before, and that's what it feels like here now. It's almost like it doesn't, because there isn't the same, level of risk and sort of implication of getting things wrong.
I'd love to see how, a lot of these kind of, and there's lots of enterprises out there, adopted sort of open source and cloud native and that sort of, DevOpsy approach and a platform engineering approach and so on. I'd love to see how much documentation they've done. I'd love to see how far up does that document, does it get to the enterprise architects, or does the enterprise architect just get an email saying, oh, by the way, we're now doing this? And it's like, oh, okay.
Well,
do I have a say in that or not?
The enterprise architect might be on the dole, actually. So, I mean,
yeah, exactly. So, and this is kind of this, the other point I think that we were trying to make with this is, yes, we're getting, like I said, excited about these tools and open source stuff that's coming, and we're kind of building it, and then we're not really thinking about it from a business perspective, and we're not certainly not thinking about it from an architectural perspective, this kind of enterprise architecture perspective. So the other question was kind of, are tools and open source software, if you like, or cloud native, eclipsing the purpose of what we're trying to do?
Um, Obviously not by themselves. It's the way in which we use them, and the fact that we can do it with open source tools much more easily
Yeah,
with microservices. I mean, you can start to put together applications, for example, just by picking, almost like a pick and mix at the sweet shop. I'll have this order processing piece and that accounting piece and this, and literally in very small chunks and put it all together. The APIs exist and
yeah,
the interconnects and bang. And people get very excited about that. And you think, yeah, okay, at a certain level, that's fine. But again, it becomes, you build more and more complexity in, the bigger the application gets, the more complexity goes in there, the more points of failure, the sort of, yes, it's easy to pull one piece out, but you put and replace it with another piece, as long as all the APIs are working, as long as everything is, the interfaces are all nicely set. And we're making some horrible assumptions, I think, that this all works. And the one area that I think will drive us back to being far more enterprise architecture aware are digital twins. If we start
really, okay.
if we start using digital twins specific, to drive business process and to understand business process, if unless you've architected that properly, it will be a mess. It will, will you be able to change a digital twin, to take on the role of, let's say, a call center in its entirety and link it to the various other parts of the
Yeah.
business? If you haven't worked that one through and got some sort of enterprise architecture in place, I think that will get harder and harder. So I think there's a barrier. I think, there's a scale barrier, but there's a complexity barrier that will mean if they keep trying to do that without enterprise architecture, it'll start to fail.
Yeah,
And I'm not
so
sure we're quite there yet.
absolutely. But I mean, I think the reason, one of the reasons why, Paul and I sort of wanted to pick this up as a topic was I was at the recent event by Harness, sponsored by Harness, called Unscripted in London, the AI Software Delivery Conference, as they called it. And one of the presenters there, I'll try and get details for all of this. I'm not sure I can show any of it. I think I might have a slide, so we'll see. But one of the presentations was about the so-called ball of mud concept. And the ball of mud concept was talking all about exactly what we're saying. It's this kind of, spaghetti sort of junction design of the architecture. If you were really to map out the sort of the open source and cloud native designs that we have today, if you were to actually architect them on and actually draw them out on a piece of paper, they would look like a spaghetti junction. It'll just be a complete mess, a ball of mud, essentially. So I think that was a really, apt way of actually describing it. And this sort of, ground up sort of approach to, to building sort of solutions is essentially destroying or potentially destroying sort of the business purpose of what we're trying to use the software for.
I think that's right. It is creating complexity elsewhere. I mean, there are plenty of difficulties with monolithic architectures, but it's complexity elsewhere is growing. And to me, I mean, if I use a sort of non-IT analogy, it's a bit like, hanging wallpaper. If you don't think about, and have the right tools and get yourself lined up and know everything, and you try putting down I'm just going to slap this wallpaper up there now. And oh God, look, there's a bubble. Press the bubble and another one pops up somewhere else, and then when you go and try and do the second roll, the pattern doesn't quite marry up, and you think, oh God. and my wife won't let me anywhere near doing that. She's very good at it, but I'm hopeless. But that's the analogy, isn't it? That you try and
Yeah,
do it without really thinking through how am I going to get that thing pasted, measured, up and rolled? Have I got the right length?
yeah,
And all those sort of things. And if you don't,
yes,
and that's what we're seeing here now. I think that's the analogy with the ball of mud. But um,
yeah.
it's a very complex world. I mean, that chart that was in that presentation
Mm,
was sort of slightly scary to look at,
yes.
in the sense that, my God, how do you pick your way through it? Because actually, one of the things that you will see more and more is this, and particularly in the sort of agentic AI space, is that the implications, the interrelation and the implications of those interrelations will be seen and felt very quickly. So you get it
Mm,
wrong, the whole thing will grind to a halt unless you're
yeah.
careful.
Yeah, and the highlights I think in the chat, I do actually have it, so I'm looking at it now. So we'll try and maybe put it up on the screen. Was a lot of manual software development going on, and then fragmented tooling, which I agree with, and I think platform engineering with IDPs is trying to really tackle that. Very little monitoring and observability, almost nothing on data. It's probably the thinnest kind of line in terms of how you manage your data. And then again, a very thin line on enterprise architecture at the top. There's a little enterprise architecture at the top. So yeah, I do agree with that. And I think this is just really a symptom of how open source and cloud native, this kind of modern way of doing things like DevOps and what have you, that really operates. It's kind of by younger generations in most cases. The people actually implementing are kind of the younger generations, and they don't really have necessarily not necessarily the discipline, but maybe the experience of, hang on, we actually need to design this properly, and then actually go and implement it. Not kind of do the implementation. Go, oh yeah, look, I can ping that, machine and that VM, and yeah, it's all working. That's fine. Drop in a bit of security and I'm done. It's like, yeah, but what does that look like on a piece of paper? How do the two boxes connect with each other, and what are you using, and protocols and things like that?
But I think it's slightly unfair in one sense. We've given developers freedom to develop applications quickly, and that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
That's.
But we're now taking it back with platform engineering.
Yeah, exactly. There's a level of
We're now dictating to them what they can do and what they can't do.
Yeah, and that's as much because in doing that, we didn't keep the connections between the development process and the architectural, all the bits and pieces, all the bits that actually they don't like doing.
Yeah.
Free them up. We've said to them, you're going to be free to develop the applications any which way you want, as fast as you want. And to an extent, we're saying we weren't quite right. And I think there's a middle path to be got, because we absolutely want developers to developing applications as fast as possible. And platform engineering ought to be, how do we facilitate that by ensuring that the other bits are in place?
Yeah.
Not how do we make the developers have to go and do that themselves, because they won't.
Yeah.
So I think that, to an extent, if you want to take the blame away from developers and leave it with everybody else and say, well, you just told us to go off and develop applications.
Yeah.
We've done that. And now you want us to run the operational platforms as well. Oh, and you don't want us to use the tools that we're used to using that really develop things fast.
Yeah.
You want to restrict what tools I can use? Yeah. Oh, hold on a minute. And so I've got a level of sympathy with the developers, even when I'm sort of wanting to bat them around the head and go, for crying out loud, would you think about the wider issues?
Yeah. That sounds like another shift left to me. So
yes, I think it is a shift left, and I think what I'm saying is, whoa, hold on, guys.
I can see somebody in KubeCon 2027 standing up and saying, "We need to shift left back to enterprise architecture," and I'll go, "Oh my god, we were talking about this 2 years ago." Anyway, okay. Right, I think we're there. Yeah, we could probably go on talking for a lot longer on these things, but we'll end it there for now. Paul, thank you as always. Really appreciate your comments and insights. Was great to be talking to you, and I've certainly missed your last couple of episodes. So welcome back, and yeah, good to have you back again. All the links for everything that we've talked about and then some will be in the description of the video. Please drop us some comments, like the video if you like the video, share the video if you want to share it with other people as well. That would be really cool. That all helps me out. Yeah, hope you enjoyed this episode and we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.